Hey, well, good evening, everybody. Want to say thank you all once again for joining us on our Tuesday night family and friends Bible study. Listen, I don't take it lightly that you will spend these 30 minutes with us. And so I hope that you hear something today that challenges you, charges you, but most of all, convicts you concerning the power that God has given you. Listen, we are on the back end of 2022. We're about a little over 2 months before we're transitioning into a new year. And this year, we've been emphasizing the significance of what it means to partner with God. Listen, I want you to consider this thought: humanity is the agency of God here on earth, and our role and our responsibility is to manifest heaven here on earth. That's the whole point of dominion, for us to exercise authority in the environment that God has placed us. Now, unfortunately, most people fail to grab this truth, and as a result, our lives are lived through the lens of a spectator. We're literally, it's almost like we're taking an observation role, but the observation is our own life. Uh, and where we watch what happens to us as opposed to intentionally creating the course that we're supposed to follow. And in essence, this is a type of separation from the will of God for your life. This separation from partnering with God, I want to say, has created some very interesting and destructive outlooks as it pertains to the personhood of God. When I first got out the military, for those who don't know, I worked as a hospital chaplain for about 2 years. And one of the common questions that I would get when I would speak to the patients, and even sometimes some of my colleagues, it was always this question about the where was God, and why did God let such and such happen to me? And most of the time that such and such was something very painful and something very drastic. And as I was learning to kind of deal with that question, a lot of times I would give this very churchy answer. But over the course of time, at least in that environment, what I learned is that, the best course of action in most instances was just to listen as the person processed what it was that they were feeling. But nevertheless, what I came to understand, particularly in that season of my life, and what I've accepted at the core of it all, is the responsibility of dominion. Uh, and listen, it's just that it's a responsibility. We all have the right to use it appropriately or misuse it. What you do with your dominion is up to you. So some people were hurt, and they did not deserve it. Some people didn't have the ability to prevent themselves from being hurt, prevent the situation from happening. In many instances, the person that was hurt, they were hurt by someone who misused their authority and made a choice to pervert their own dominion. And it's my hope for all of us, that these teachings around this subject of partnering with God has charged you to pursue God in the right attitude and the right spirit, with this understanding that God trusts you to represent Him in character. For even as the word says that we are made in His image and likeness. And so when we're going about our day to day, always remember that we're made in His image and likeness, and you have a responsibility to model Him correctly. Now, last week, we began a message. Now, I apologize for those who are in social media who did not have a chance to catch that message. We're having some technical difficulties. But for those of us on the Zoom community, we began a message last week around the concept of manifesting through faith. And tonight I want to continue in that vein. So if you would turn with me to Second Timothy, we're going to be reading um, 2 Timothy chapter 4. We're going to be reading verse 1 through 3. And then also I want you to also hold your finger at First Peter chapter 5. We're going to read verses 8 through 9. I want to say thank you once again for everybody who's joining us in Zoom as well as on social media. All right, so that's Second Peter chapter 4, starting at verse 1, and it says, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and teaching. For the time will come where they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. Let's jump over to First Peter. Once again, chapter 5, verses 8 through 9. And it reads, Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. For a thought tonight, I'm using open hands and closed ears. Open hands, closed ears. Most of the time, when people talk about being under attack by the adversary, is mostly attributed to an external situation. And I want you to think about this for a second. You know, something broke down, it was the devil. A relationship is out of whack, it's the devil. You know, money is tight, it's the devil. But truthfully, more often than not, the attack is actually the thought that is coming in mind. What are you thinking in the midst of what you're going through? The fact that money is tight, something broke, people are acting crazy. Yes, all of that can be going on, but your thought will more likely determine your response. So the admonishment, the charge that Peter gives in this Second Peter text, he says, "Be sober and be vigilant," meaning to be calm, be watchful. Then he says, "Resist the devil," meaning don't give in to whatever it is that the devil is tempting you with. Resist it. And then he also says, "Be unmovable in your faith." And like I said, we're talking about manifesting through faith. If the adversary can get you off of your conviction, then eventually he can begin to sway your belief system. And I want to take this conversation a step further by saying that we don't have to wait for the adversity for this to be your posture, this being vigilant, this being sober. This is an attitude that we should have even when it doesn't seem like anything is going on. Most of the time, the bait is set when the mouse is not looking. And I'm not calling us mice, but I am suggesting that when we let our spiritual guards down, it's easy for us to get caught up. One way that we get caught up is by not having a hold of the word for ourselves. I'm not suggesting to anybody, this is great if you can do this, but I'm not suggesting that you have the Bible memorized from front to back. But what I am saying is that there should come a point in time when the word that has gripped you, the word that has seized you, the word that has revealed the truth of God to you, that same word should have the ability to keep you. And the issue is that if the word captured you, how is it that we can be swayed by all of these external things as though the word has no more value all of a sudden? And this is what we were talking about last week in the message Inside Job. See, faith is supposed to determine the outlook. But the issue oftentimes is that we allow the externals to begin to create a faith system within us on its own. And the reality is that once again, if we're taking our cues from the world, then eventually we're going to begin to respond how the world responds. Now, here's the dilemma. Romans 10:17, it says, now faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But when we often teach But what we often do when we teach what God did, not what God said. We often teach what God did, but very oftentimes we don't teach what God said. Now, there's nothing wrong with showcasing the exploits and the ability of God. But here's the thing, when you highlight the acts more than the instruction, you lose context. By definition, what context means is the circumstances that form the setting for an event, statement, idea, and in terms which can be fully understood and assessed. Long story short, the context gives us understanding why the action was completed. So when we read the text, oftentimes what you'll see something that says Jesus taught, then he cast out devils, or he healed. There was always a teaching, and then it was accompanied by the act. That's why I'm saying that we need to give attention to the word, not just get fixated on the stuff that he did, because when we do that, we lose the context of what's going on. Now, here's the dilemma part. Like I said, we get fixated on what Jesus did, but give the world our ear. The world informs us, and then what it does is that it gives us a sense of identity. If you watch the news 24 hours a day, eventually you're going to be pushing the same fear that you've been hearing, because you've been lending your ear to it. But here's the thing, this is where the confusion sets in, because we keep telling ourselves, we get fixated on what Jesus did, but we're listening to other sources. And then that creates this atmosphere within inside of us of confusion. And so then we begin to start questioning the very things that God said concerning us, because we're more familiar with what the world says, but we want the hand of God. That's why I'm saying hands open, ears closed. There has to come a point in time where we're hearing and understanding what it is that the Lord is saying. There's an expression that says seeing is believing. What I want to tell you is that that expression is not a biblical principle. Okay. Seeing is believing is not a biblical principle. That is a world principle. Jesus said, and this is John chapter 20, verse 29, for those who want to read it on their own later in their own study. This is what Jesus said: Thomas, because you have seen me. This is Jesus after he rose from the grave with the holes in his hand and in the pierced side. He said, Thomas, because you have seen me, you believed. Blessed are those who have not seen yet believed. See, the thing is that if we're depending solely on our eyes can be deceptive, but our faith should be stirred, and our faith should be founded in the word that has established all of us. Now, listen, for the person who says that, seeing is believing, there might be a degree I can get with that a little bit. If a person says, I saw it in the realm of the spirit, and look, and I'm a person who teaches that. But even with that, there should be that should be accompanied by a released word. Most people's belief is shaped by their senses, and that's dangerous. That's oh, I said all of that to get to this point. If your belief is shaped by your senses, you're in a dangerous place. And what I mean by that is that at the sensory level, we are conditioned to go after what gratifies. On the sensory level, you are conditioned to go after what gratifies the senses. That's why a lot of messages are centered around you getting stuff from God or being able to do stuff, because what it does is it makes you feel good. Ooh, I can't wait till I have and touch and all this other stuff. But the reality is that if you live in that place where you need your senses gratified, you can run the risk of missing God and what it is that he desires for you to experience. Um, the senses, or whatever, what we're talking about right now, these are important components of our walk with the Lord. However, we must preach what Jesus said more than what he did. The word says in John 14:12, greater works we will do. But when we teach, and I want to hear, and especially for the ministers, I know we got some budding ministers in the group, but when we teach solely what he did, we end up comparing and examining our own inability to do. And so, even as a minister myself, I want to be careful not to always present a message about do, because what happens is that we begin to look at our own insecurities, and then we begin to dismiss what God is saying about what we can do. But what I understand is that the word, when I emphasize uh, the word, what that does is that begins to develop a foundation within you. When the word emphasizes work over word, excuse me, we can when we're emphasizing work over word, we can often find ourselves like Samson, uh, gifted, but shifting away from the very same God that gave him the ability. And that's what we see when you look at the story of Samson. See, Samson was fixated on the strength that he had, but in the process, he was actually moving away from the will of God in his life. And that, for all of us, it becomes a dangerous thing when you get caught up in the idea that you are the gift. No, what actually the gift that you have is supposed to help you accomplish the things that God gave you. There's a lot of stories about, I don't know why I'm going here, but there's a lot of stories about entertainers, how they feel used up because the people don't know them. Now, the people say that they like them, but in reality, what they like is the gift. They don't even know the individual. But for us as believers, what I want to tell you is don't get so wrapped up in the work while neglecting the word. In teaching the word, what we have is we have a better understanding of our rights and responsibilities. In the word responsibility is the word response. So the question is, how will I respond when I hear the word? Because, like I said, the word, it tells us our rights and our responsibilities. See, we're kingdom citizens. This is a language ascribed to us as believers. So what that means is that as a kingdom citizen, I have a right. So the word is going to highlight to me what comes with being a kingdom citizen. But also, as a kingdom citizen, I also understand that I have a responsibility. Even as we live in our states, one of the responsibilities for adults is, you can be called up for jury duty. That's a responsibility. And so, even as believers, there's a responsibility that comes along with how we identify with the personhood of God. And so, the question is, what is your response to the responsibility? One of the things that's happening here in Augusta, and my wife mentioned it a little bit in the prayer, but there's been a lot of violence, a lot of youth violence. And the craziest thing is that a lot of the attitude in the city is that the city is afraid of young people, and so they're locking stuff down and closing this and closing that. But the reality is that the devil doesn't win. And so that's not his right. He doesn't get to demand that stuff gets shut down. And as a kingdom citizen, we have a responsibility here in this community. Not everybody's responsibility is the same, but the question is, how do we respond in the wake of what's going on? Matters of health, healing, wealth, relationships, there is a kingdom way, there's an instruction of doing it. And because of the word, I understand these things are necessary. If anyone is sick, if anyone is poor, the reason why the reason why healing is necessary, the reason why wealth is necessary. See, we think that is because I don't want to be sick, or I don't want to be broke. But in reality is that the reason why God gives us wealth, the reason why God extends healing to us is because if he doesn't, it makes him look bad. And as we get into the word, we now understand that. See, what I'm suggesting is that oftentimes what we want to do is we want to learn the different how to do certain things so that we don't go without. But we need to inform ourselves once again as to why it's necessary. Because as ambassadors, as partners with God, we understand that our actions, what they do is they reflect who he is in our life. And so we know that, listen, look at our own government, our own country. When healthcare and jobs are bad, the first thing we do is what? We blame the government. And so, and it becomes a poor reflection of the government. And so, if there's no healing, if there's no wealth amongst the people, it becomes a poor representation of the God that we say we serve. But we don't get that if you're not getting into the word. If the word is not synced in you, now I understand that, you know what, all of these things that the Lord has given me stewardship over, my health, he's given me stewardship over it. The last thing I want to do is bring, disease and poor health to myself, and then blame it on God, when the reality is the word said that he has made me a steward, that I have dominion. See, this is my responsibility. Now I partner with the word to manifest the results that I want. Lastly, what I'll say to you is that in Isaiah, the significance of the word over the work is this: God said, put me in remembrance. Now he's saying, remind me of what it is that I said. And in reminding him of his word, we give account of what it is that we say we believe. I felt it necessary to kind of go here tonight with this conversation of faith and partnering with God, because at the end of the day, a lot of us are fixated on God doing, but can you be kept if he's not doing anything, or at least it appears that nothing is happening? And one of the ways that you can keep yourself steadfast, as the word says, the one way that you can keep yourself steady on the things of God is by being rooted in the word. See, I understand the responsibility that comes with my ambassadorship as a representative of God. The word is what informs me. The word is what I'm able to, when things aren't going right in my world, I can say, hey, your word says. See, that's that whole put me in remembrance. Hey, Father, this is what you said. And so when my environment doesn't look like I want it to look, I'm reminding him of the promises that he said to me. I'm not reminding him of his actions, because listen, the reality is that not everybody experiences God in the same way. Your experiences, the actions of God in your life are probably going to be totally different from mine, and vice versa. But one thing is that we can hold God and we can place his word uh, back in front of him, because even as he says, I watch over my word to perform it. And what I would suggest before you all, once again, is understand the word that is guiding your life. Is that word strong enough to keep you in difficult times? Listen, as it pertains to partnering with God, we have to understand that we don't have a relationship with God where we're always asking and begging and pleading for stuff. Uh, that's not your relation. That's the language of a servant and of a slave. That's not what you are. You are a child of God. For those who are matured, you are sons of God. And so the conversation with God should be reflective of the understanding of the relationship that you have. But if you're not fixated and rooted in the word, then your conversation is not going to be consistent with the relationship. And so I hope all that made sense. Uh, but nevertheless, listen, every Tuesday when we get together, we have the Zoom community going on at the same time as the social media. But here's the difference: when we close out on Facebook and YouTube, we keep the conversation going in Zoom. And so, if you want to be a part of that, feel free to email or inbox us, and we'll make sure we get you that information. But with that being said, thank you all for joining us. Take care and God bless.